welcome to Viking Preparedness. I'm Pastor Joe Fox, and so what I'd like to talk about today is considerations. I've got 5 of them for you when purchasing a bug out location, when acquiring a bug out location. But I am talking about a chunk of land somewhere to which you intend to flee if things get crazy, and on which you have plans to put a cabin or a trailer or, you know, a teepee, a tiny house, whatever. Either alone, you know, just you and your family, or with other families, things like that. And so let's just go over 5 considerations for you. Now, the first one is not a consideration, but it is still there, but it's so obvious I didn't want to put it in a list of 5. But go to buy real estate, and a real estate agent will tell you, because they all use the same jokes. You know, there's 3 most important things about real estate are location, location, location. Yeah, well, duh. I mean, it doesn't do you any good to bug out from Chicago to St. Louis. Right? I mean, that's just no good. That's no bueno. And so, yeah, the location is important. You don't want to be near large, huge population centers. You don't want to be downwind of a military base. You probably don't want to be next to a military base, even upwind. You don't want to be downwind of a nuclear power plant. You know, all those kinds of like normal, yeah, no kidding things. But location is important. First thing I want to talk about is affordability. See, you have to determine right off the get-go how much money you're talking about. How much money do you have? How much money can you afford to spend on this place? It is difficult in most places to get a bank loan on raw land, which is probably what most of y'all will be looking at. So how are you gonna afford this place? Well, one thing you can do is a lot of people selling land will do an owner financed deal. And you know what those deals are anymore, I don't know. It's been a long time since I did that. We bought this place on an owner financed deal, and at the time we had to put 10% down, and which is pretty light, and then we paid off payments at 10% interest, right? So in that case, you have to find out, this is how much I have for a down payment, and this is how much I can afford for a mortgage, if you will. And you have to kind of know what you're getting into before. It doesn't do you any good to go look at some $1 million property if you can only come up with $10,000, right? And so know what you're dealing with, know how much you can afford. If you can't afford it on your own, then you can go in with some other people. Get together, pool your money. I've got lots of other videos on how, you know, different communities and groups of people are doing that, and go buy something with a group of people. But the first thing you have to understand is how much can you afford? Then start your search. Okay, so where do you look? Number 1 is affordability. Number 2, the second factor, is distance. How far away do you want your bug out location to be? And you get into kind of competing priorities. Obviously, you want a bug out location because where you are now isn't going to work. So you need to get away from this mess, you know, whatever this mess is where you live, and you have to go somewhere. But let's say you live in Washington, D.C., right, or Northern Virginia, for that matter, and you're like, yeah, we need a bug out. We need a bug out location. Unless you've got assets that the vast majority of Americans do not, picking a bug out location in Wyoming probably not a good move, because you'll never get there, right? I have a good friend who said after 9/11, if you didn't bug out on 9/11, you're never going to bug out. Well, there were people with bug out locations and who had bug out plans on 9/11, and they didn't bug out. Well, why not? As it turns out, it was a good move not to bug out. But at the time when it was time to bug out or stay, if you didn't bug out, there wasn't enough information there. You should have bugged out. I submit to you that if you have a real bug out location and a real bug out plan, you will have many false starts. Another video for another time. There's excuses you can use so you don't get fired from your job and so on. But, you know, better a day too early than 5 seconds too late, right? And so look at distance. It has to be far enough to be out of the way, but it has to be close enough for you to get to with the means at your disposal. What are the means at your disposal? Obviously, you have a car or a truck, right? Most Americans do. And so, okay, how far do you want to have to drive? What do you have to drive through? to get there. Some places are a non-starter. I have a friend who lives in Los Angeles. You'll never bug out. You'll never get out of there, right? You won't. After an event, post-event. And so figure out how far is too far. How far do you want to have to drive? You know, right now you can get on a road, on a superhighway or whatever, an interstate, and you can drive for 5 hours and you know, get pretty far. After an event, roads may be closed, canalized, controlled, and you may have to take back routes. How long do you want to be on the road before you get to your place? What if it's an EMP? How are you getting there? You know, all kinds of talk back and forth, but it's just something for you to put into your calculus. What if you have to walk? Okay, how far do you really want to walk till you get to your little slice of paradise? So think about distance. Another thing, and I wrote a guy a letter. I found a new channel on YouTube about a guy who's starting a community or a bug out location or something. I wrote him, I said, hey, I'd like to help you mentally with some things. But a very, very important aspect. Third, so the first one's affordability. These are my notes. The second one is distance. The third one is water. You gotta have water where your bug out location is going to be. Now, what's that mean? Does that mean that the high desert of North Texas, is there even a high desert in North Texas? There's desert in South Texas, whatever. Some high desert of New Mexico, that's totally out of the question. I don't know. What's the water situation there? Can you drill a well? Do you have the money to afford to drill a well or two? Because, you know, one is none and two is one. Do you have the money to do that? If you do, okay, you can probably live anywhere and drill a deep enough well. But if you don't, you have to look at other things. Again, I keep coming back to her, and I haven't seen her for years, and I don't get money from her or anything, but Marjorie Wildcraft has a really good video, Backyard Food Production or something, and she lives in a really dry part of Texas, or she did when she made the DVD, and I think most of their water comes from rainwater. They catch a lot of rainwater off of a big barn that they had built. And so maybe that's an option. But you can't just poo-poo it. You have to really have a plan for how you're going to get water. And in some cases, how you're going to purify water and how you're going to carry water and how you're going to store water. But it does you no good to go to a bug out location and die of thirst 2 days later, right? So really think about water with your bug out location. So we've got affordability, we have distance, we have water. This gets to be a little bit of my personality, but I'm thinking if you've got to go to a bug out location, this is not a Hurricane Katrina. If it was a Hurricane Katrina type situation, you could get in your car with your credit card, drive outside of the, you know, the threat zone, drive a little bit further to get away from the masses of people and check into a Holiday Inn, right? You don't really need a bug out location. I'm thinking a bug out location, you know, the world as we know it has come to an end. It is a world without rule of law. And so you're there for the duration, right? Well, if that's the case, I seriously doubt you're going to have enough food stored. You may bury a couple of those shipping containers with, you know, 12 years worth of food for you and your wife. If that's the case, cool, go on you. Most people can't afford to do that. And you're going to have a means, therefore, to produce food. And so this piece of land that you're fixing to buy, to use for your bug out location, does it have the ability to sustain plant life? Do you know how to grow there, to garden there? It doesn't have to have it right now, but you need to develop that pretty quickly on your land. Example, here at Shofar Mountain, it's pretty tough land. You know, it is rocky, it is very thin soil, and it has taken us 3 years. We use the Back to Eden method primarily. We use a couple other methods here and there, but primarily we're using the Back to Eden method, and it is starting to build up pretty good soil in the older parts of our garden. The newer parts, it's like mulch on rock, you know, but eventually it'll look like the other stuff. So there's a way to make most places bloom, most. Again, outside of Phoenix, maybe not so much. So food production, what about animals? You know, you're going to need a meat source, and hunting is not going to get it, not in the long term. And so does the land that you're considering, the bug out location that you're considering, does it have the ability to put animals on it? You know, can you raise some critters? Because 2 eyes in front, predator, meat eater, right? Go ahead, vegans, give me a thumb down. But yeah, you need to raise some animals. So does it have the ability for food production? And then finally, so the first point is affordability, distance, water, food production. The last point we're going to talk about today, out of the 5 points for things you should consider when looking for a bug out location, is access. What do I mean by access? You need to be able to get to your bug out location, and that was kind of related to distance, but it's also related to physical. You know, if somebody sells you the top of a rocky peak in the Rockies, and say, you know, this is an impenetrable, impregnable fortress, and you can have this bug out location, how are you going to get there? I mean, how are you physically going to get there with the stuff that you're bugging out with? You need to be able to get to your bug out location. If you buy a place that, I have a friend who's going to figure out here eventually, has no road access to it. You know, the road kind of goes by and you got to go through neighbors, and then you've got a big field with a wet spot in it. You're going to have to put a road in, right, so that you can get through in all weather back and forth when you need to, and you're not stuck in, you know, a bog of, you know, muddy mire or something. So you have to have access to it. But by the other token, you don't want it to be too easy access. Like, I would never consider buying the perfect 20 acres sitting on the side of a superhighway, you know, that you drive by when you're going down an interstate or something. Look at that beautiful land, man. It's got that creek on it, and the cows look so beautiful. I'd never buy one next to an interstate. That access is way too easy, right? So there's a little trade-off there. Personally, I like property that's down a gravel road, you know, and then off of the gravel road. So you go down paved roads to some point, and then you get off on gravel roads, and you go down gravel roads for a while, and then bam, there's your property. I think that's something pretty interesting to look for on property. And so just, hey, they're 5 simple things, but maybe you didn't think about them. A lot of people just want to know, okay, well, I just want to go to the Ozarks. Okay, well, there are many places in the Ozarks that fit all 5 of those criteria. There are many places in the Ozarks that don't fit any of them. And so, you know, you have to kind of start refining your parameters on what you're looking for. So it's affordability. Can you afford it? It's distance from where you are. Can you actually get there when you need to go? Is it convenient? I didn't say this, but it's important. Is it convenient to leave work on weekends, let's say, go down there and do work on your place and come back? It has to be reachable to do that. If it takes you 12 hours to get there, and you know you're getting off work at 6 o'clock on a Friday, and you got to be back at work at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday, that's kind of tough to work and develop your bug out location. So affordability, distance, water. You have to have access to water whether you make it or it's there, but you really have to solve that problem. The ability to produce food, and finally access. It should be mildly difficult but doable, and not such a pain in the neck for you that you just don't want to go there. You personally, when you have to go there and work on things and hang out there for the week or whatever. Hey, I hope that was helpful. I hope there was some nugget in there you could use. If you like it, share it, and I'll see you out there.